So I was thinking today about how being a veterinarian may have changed who I am as a fantasy writer. And there's actually a few incidents in particular that come to mind that changed based on my knowledge of medicine. So for fun, I'm going to break those down for you and share some of the influence of the veterinary medicine on my fantasy novels. One thing about my fantasy is that I really like things to be as realistic as possible. I know that's kind of weird, fantasy, right? But I want there to be consequence. I want there to be kind of grit, dirt under the fingernails kind of stuff. So I do try my best to include a lot of realistic details, whether that's the bugs because they're camped near a river, or disease, malnutrition. So one of the things is wounds, injuries. I try to make injuries be as realistic as I can. I want to make sure that there's real consequences. You can't wave a wand in my world and suddenly be better. There are only 2 incidents where we actually use magic for healing, and I'll come to those later in the series. But for the most part, if you get wounded, you're going to die, or at least the wound is going to stick around. So one example of how I had to kind of figure out the medical and the real reality of a wound was actually one of my first books, which was Dragon's Talon. In this novel, towards the end, Charon, who's the dragon keeper, gets stabbed in the chest. I was debating as to whether or not he actually lacerated a lung. He didn't, but there was a real problem. I know how to handle an embedded object, so it cuts the tip off, and he's left with a piece stuck in his chest, and he managed to navigate a few more interactions before that becomes a real problem, and he's going to have to remove it. But as soon as he does that, the hole is big enough that it's going to cause a pneumothorax and a collapsed lung in his case. So I was trying to figure out how to solve that with, well, no modern medicine. Now, I did cheat a little bit. I did use the knowledge of the dragons. They do understand enough about anatomy that they can figure out how to deal with this properly, but spoiler, I guess, he ends up with a dragon scale fused to his chest over the wound. But there's even things about the timing of how they remove the object, as well as when they put the scale in place and then basically cauterize it into place. That isn't the end of the story for him either, because that hurts, and also there's a big problem with sterility here. So over the beginning of Soulburner, one thing you'll notice is that Charon's not at his best. In fact, he's fading, and he fights it, but at some point he's passing out. So I actually dealt with sepsis in my world to make it a little more realistic and make sure that that wound is something of great consequence, that he can't just walk off.